your field teams using spreadsheets to collect data? That causes problems for your GIS tools. Inconsistencies develop when people add columns or squeeze extra data into a cell, causing unreliable data and broken imports. People use old versions of spreadsheets even after you've sent out new versions to your team. They mistype or transpose latitude and longitude, resulting in bad location data. And when your spreadsheets have garbled data, your GIS tools do too. There's a better way. Fulcrum's no-code platform replaces those spreadsheets with mobile apps, helping you improve your field team's performance while delivering accurate, automatically geotagged data directly into your GIS tools. Try it for free for 30 days at fulcrumapp.com.
Hello and welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming out to our webinar and panel discussion. I'm Jake Freevold, Head of Product Marketing for Fulcrum, and I'm here today with two special guests from Respec to talk about best practices for repeatability in field services. Before we get there, let me briefly introduce Fulcrum. We provide a no-code platform that helps you create location-aware mobile apps that enable mobile data collection, automate workflows, and provide insights through, among other things, location intelligence, including feeding data into GIS systems. Doing so allows Fulcrum clients to manage safety, quality, asset, and environmental inspections from end to end, maximize field team performance and agility, and harness the value of location in apps for mobile teams and GIS managers, all without writing code. My guests today, Paul and James, are from Respec, a Fulcrum partner, and I'd like them to take a minute to introduce themselves and their company. We'll start with Paul Wickman. Paul? Paul, if you're there, if you can turn on your camera and there we go.
Sorry about that.
Nope, it's not a webinar if there's no glitch. Go ahead, Paul.
That's
Thanks.
right. That's right. Thank you. Well, my name's Paul Wickman. I'm a product manager and GIS data manager at Respec, and we've been using Fulcrum for probably 7 or 8 years, and we're excited to be here and kind of share our experiences with field data collection and getting that to integrate well with GIS.
Great. And James?
Hi, everyone. My name is James Brown. I'm the Director of Health and Safety at Respec. And while health and safety has Fulcrum has a good application for health and safety, I'm coming on as previously an ecologist with Respec. Did a lot of field services, used Fulcrum, and so I'm coming into this conversation kind of on that side of the spectrum as a field services technician. But thanks for having me on.
Thank you both for being here today. It's going to be a good discussion. As Paul and I were talking about what's going on with Respec's Phase 1 environmental reviews, we realized that there was a lot of great stuff coming out of that discussion that was related to making processes more repeatable. So that was the genesis of today's webinar. And that's related to our companies, both Respec and Fulcrum, in a variety of ways, but also related to what real-world organizations are trying to accomplish. For example, repeatability is critical to a company like Respec. But repeatability means different things to different people, and we'll get to that in a minute, a little bit more. At Fulcrum, we want to provide the consistency that people need while being flexible enough to adapt to the changes that are inevitable from one project to the next. And on top of that, we're all specifically interested in the challenges geospatial professionals face when dealing with all of these issues. So that's what we're going to do today, provide perspectives from that we've gained from field work done by our partners and customers. And I say our partners and customers, both Respec and Fulcrum fit into that, including some of the methodological and technology-related choices we've made. And we'll talk a little bit how they help us deal with the complex task of supporting multiple, somewhat different programs at what time. And what we're going to do is start with just a few slides to set the stage. So I'm going to share a couple of slides here. If I can get those brought into the main program. Excellent, thank you. And I'm going to hand this off to Paul and James to talk about what they have done at the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife.
All right, I'll take this first slide. So we recently got a project with the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife. It's a 2-year project to do stream mitigation. It's for the eastern region. Don't have the regions marked out on this map, but just think of it as I guess the eastern third of the state. So it's a wide service area. We're in charge of monitoring any pre-site assessment surveys, along with engineering design, modeling, stream restoration, all the data collection involved in that. And during the proposal phase, we proposed using the Fulcrum app to do our field data collection. And the reason that's important is because our office here in Lexington may be doing permitting. Our biologists, part of the biologists are in Eastern Kentucky. We have the design team is in North Carolina. And then we have construction managers that are central part of the state. So our teams are remote, and this was a good opportunity to bring in a platform to create standard forms that anyone can use in the field. And we'll have, kind of near real-time data that can be shared among all team members without, going through the hassle of recopying data when you get back to the office and then emailing separate spreadsheets and files to folks.
Super. Moving on to the next slide then. I think, Paul, you were going to take this one to talk a little bit about this.
Yeah, thanks. The reason we kind of brought these two examples up is, like James was talking about the first one with the Kentucky Fish and Wildlife. That's a great example of the data collection form is pretty well defined. In fact, it's very solidly defined. The state has sort of mandated the specific questions that are going to be answered and the expected responses. And so that's a great example of something that's, relatively speaking, easy to make standard, scalable, and repeatable. This other example comes from these types of site inspections called Phase 1 environmental site assessments. So these are inspections or assessments in the field that RESPEC performs across all 50 states. And typically these types of activities come up when there are commercial property purchases involved. So think of one company exchanging the assets with another company, or one company acquiring another. They want to understand what any potential environmental hazards are, or any cleanup responsibility that they might be burdened with after they make this purchase. So they perform this Phase 1 type of assessment. The challenge is, although it's sort of described, looking for and documenting potential environmental cleanup responsibilities, there's no state or nationwide standard that defines, here are the things you need to look for, here are all the questions. It's essentially an agreement between the buyer and the seller of the property. And so so that presents two challenges. One is it's not necessarily standard in that same way that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife type of work is, or rather the Kentucky Fish and Wildlife. It's sort of open to interpretation. The other challenge is that different staff at our company have different workflows. We'll probably get into this a little bit later, but RESPEC has grown over the last 15 years, largely by acquisition of other companies. And so as we bring on other staff, and these other companies had been doing Phase 1 assessments, they each have their own kind of workflow. And so we have to balance trying to establish more consistency across the entire company, but also let folks still have that flexibility of carrying out these types of assessments in ways that they know how to do the best for their clients.
Okay, super. So this is the kind of information we're bringing to the table, talking about these different kind of projects. I'm going to stop sharing right now and bring us to a little bit more of a discussion. And we'll do that for about another 25 minutes, half an hour, something like that. And then we'll go into a live Q&A session. So let's start off, Paul. One of the first things you said to me when we were talking about all of this was something like, repeatability is defined. It has a standard definition, but that standard definition depends on who you're talking to. It kind of reminds me of people love to say that standards are so great that everybody wants to have their own, right? Can you tell us a little bit about what that means for you and for RESPEC when you're managing projects?
Yeah, I think a I'll carry on, and James, just to interrupt me if you've got some things to add. But I mean, I think this touches on what I mentioned just in that previous slide, that because of the way RESPEC has grown, and we have a lot of different different domains and disciplines that we do business in: mining and energy, water, natural resources, infrastructure development, and so we've spent the last few years really trying to kind of grow our company, and again, from kind of a GIS and a technology standpoint, to really bring some consistency and some unity across the company. So for example, if there's a GIS analyst who may be working in one office and is typically used to working on, let's say, flood modeling projects and the tasks associated with that, we'd love for those folks to also be able to work on an infrastructure project, right, and deliver GIS services to a road construction project. And so we want to have some amount of consistency and familiarity as folks cross between these different kinds of projects. But again, depending on how folks kind of came into the company, they have different comfort levels with different types of technologies or different tools that they're used to using. And so, the other thing I think that makes our company powerful in the sense of how we work as a team is we tend to shy away, or we don't put a lot of, we're very deliberate about sort of imposing corporate standards across the company. We feel that sort of too many mandates from the top down kind of limit creative thinking. But the reality is too, we want to have some kind of ability to have this consistency across things.
Yeah, I'll add, and it even goes beyond like what Paul's mentioning. So you acquire another small firm and they have their own process, their own way of doing things. But a lot of times beyond that, it's the clients have established, there's a certain output that clients are used to from that company. So how their reports are scaled with the information they get, how that information is delivered. And a lot of times these consulting firms, it's hard for them to change that up. It's like now I'm with another firm. They have their own set of standards, but I have clients that are used to reading our reports and our data one way. Now it's not only we have to adapt internally to standardize things, but we have to now communicate with the clients to have them aware that we're making some slight changes. It's like your information is not going to change, but maybe the templates and the forms and how it's delivered may change. So it's a communication that goes a little bit further than just internal.
What's interesting to me here is that it seems like we're talking about repeatability here, and it's very much in your interest to make sure that you've got as repeatable of a process as possible, but at the same time, you've got people who want differences and variations and so on, which means you need a lot of flexibility at the same time to adapt to changes as well. One of the questions that comes out of that for me, it has to do with lead time. You need to have a certain amount of time to be able to adapt and make to what's going on in the field. And actually what I'd like to do is pull up a polling question before we get to the folks from RESPEC talking about how this relates to their work. We have a polling question, number one, which is related to how much lead time you have for a project that has a field work component. So if you're going to send people out in the field for an environmental survey or some other kind of survey, you need to be able to support them with the appropriate kind of apps to make sure that they're able to collect that data, or maybe apps aren't always appropriate, but whatever it is that you do. And I'm interested in the response from the audience members here. Do you have plenty of time to evaluate and create what's needed? Do you have maybe not enough time, but it's enough to get the job done? It may not be perfect, but it's better than nothing. Do you end up with not getting nearly enough time to even get the job done right? You really are scrambling, and when the job is done, you're like, yeah, okay, well, we have some information, but it's not what it really should have been. Or do you even get to the situation where you find out after the fact that people needed something basically today? They're going out in the field tomorrow. They are packing their backpack right now, and you should have been able to support them, but they're just telling you now that they need some information. So if we have, if the folks from Geospatial world can let us know what the poll looks like here. Hopefully, it'll be open for about 15 minutes, these polls will, but we'll be able to talk about some results over the course of the next couple of minutes, hopefully, if we can get some information on what it says there.
Yeah, well, we kind of leave that poll up for a few seconds. I'll say, Jake, we probably should have come up with a fourth option to that poll, which is, right, I get negative lead time, which is, I'm going to guess it's pretty common, or I know from my experience as a GIS analyst in the past, that you would get presented with data after it's already said and done, right? So someone says, here's the information I went out and collected yesterday. Now make do with it what you need to in order to get it delivered to the client. And so that is, that can be frustrating, but that I think is a good tie into a bit of our conversation later, which is just, the field staff and GIS folks and everyone else in the company, right? We've all got the best interest in the client, the client's best interest in our heart. And it's, it can be a struggle sometimes to make sure that it's kind of equitably distributed, how that, how that sort of burden of preparing ahead of time versus kind of time spent maybe cleaning up the data at the tail end of things.
Well, and interestingly, Paul, the kind of the kind of data that you're getting, because the field is doing it first, like without consulting you necessarily, or without additional input, they're using whatever methods they want to use. So they could be doing it with paper and pencil and a notebook. They could be doing it with some kind of an app that they've got. They could be doing it with spreadsheets. They could be almost literally anything, and you're expected to make do with the data that comes back. And part of our discussion initially was also around that, to some extent that makes sense to a field person, right? A field person says, I've got a job to do. So they go out and they want to do their job. And the amount that we impose on them from the outside feels like strictures. It feels like something that they don't necessarily want to and necessarily agree with. So maybe it's worth, while we're waiting for responses maybe it's worth talking a little bit about that. How do you deal with a situation like that? Are there ways, I'll talk a little bit about how Fulcrum would approach that problem, but are there ways that you kind of provide the means necessary for the field to do their job while still also making sure that you get what you need at a centralized position?
Yeah, so I see we got some answers there. I'll let you kind of distill those for a second, Jake. But I think one of the things we're discovering, and again, I'll kind of describe this in terms of Fulcrum, just because that's a platform that we're using more and more, is we find the flexibility nice. So look, in my experience, we kind of have field staff that are they're either they prefer to take the time and be more deliberate with the answers or sort of information that they're collecting out in the field. And so they're really driven and really appreciate sort of well thought out design forms that have very sort of prescriptive questions with drop down choices. And, it takes them a bit longer in the field, but the time that they spend then on the back end, on the tail end, tends to be less, because a lot of the information that they're ultimately going to need has already been quantified. And that's kind of for a GIS professional who's dealing with the data, that's kind of the dream situation, is that those answers are all very well accounted for as different attributes, and it's easier to kind of manage at the other end of the project. The other folks we have are field staff that would really prefer to get in and out as quickly as possible. And so they prefer a lot of free-form text, maybe even voice memos that are going to do some voice to text translation for them. And so they can spend less time, say, in the field. Maybe they could do more site visits because they're going through it more quickly. But the flip side is that there's more time then at the tail end, kind of teasing apart those narratives to come up with, more discrete answers. And we haven't done any measurements necessarily on those two methods, but I'm going to guess that in the end, neither one of those is necessarily from soup to nuts, from the beginning of the process to delivering, say, the data to the client, if either one of those is necessarily better or more efficient than the other. It's just really a matter of where is the time spent, or arguably kind of who is the burden put on to ultimately to organize that data.
Well, and the kinds of issues that you face might end up being different too, right? If you're trying to collect a lot of free-form text on the front end and you're transcribing that into some kind of spreadsheet or system on the back end, then you get more transcription errors and that kind of thing that has to be sorted out. So there could be the amount of work that gets done on the front end where you're capturing cleaner data may make for better inputs to that overall process as well, depending on the situation. So certainly from a Fulcrum standpoint, we're always focused on trying to make it as easy as possible for people to work the way that they want to work while still providing the highest quality data. If you need free form text, or if you need, somebody audio capture, you can certainly do that. But at the same time, you want to make sure that you're converting it into the right data that flows into the process from that point forward.
Yeah, I think it's a sales pitch.
Go ahead, James.
Yeah, I think you gotta sell this to the field technicians, the biologists out there. And I know in the ecological world, everybody loves their pen and paper forms. They go out there, they have them in their hand. They're not worried anything will happen to them. The flip side of that is, and this is what I've experienced in the field, is you go out there, it's dirty. You got to bring a cell phone. You got to bring a GPS. You got to bring your write in the rain paper. Having an app kind of eliminates a lot of that. You don't need to stumble around trying to take pictures of the stream while trying to get a GPS coordinate. And then you're filling out paperwork it's going to be muddy. It's going to get dirty. You fill out what you can. And like Paul said, you're quantifying a lot in the field. So you want to make sure you do it right the first time, because you don't have to go out twice. But when you get back to the office, typically you have to transpose that on another form. So you have a clean version, and then you take that and put it in a spreadsheet for any type of calculations. When you're out in the field and doing rapid bioassessment protocols, that's a quick form to make in an app. And it's something like Fulcrum. You can go out there and you click through it and it'll automatically give you your score. You don't have to deal with any paperwork. You don't have to deal with your location. Forms can be easily modified to add water quality data if you're capturing that as well. So I think it's just it's one of those, it takes good communication between the GIS side and the field side to say, hey, we have a solution that will increase your workflow and your efficiency. And, if done properly, you'll have less work to do on the backside of this. The front side, like Paul said, it's kind of figuring out who's going to build out your forms. Is it going to be your GIS, or is it going to be your biologist who's going to be responsible for that? In the consulting world, that often, it's often who's got the budget to do it, and who's going to bill the hours to do it. But I think there's enough room on both sides where the two can come together to figure out the best possible solution and make it work. And then it's repeatable as long as you're within the same state. There is variations. You go from state to state, but you can use those as forms as templates. So then there's just very little modification to go from doing a delineation form in Kentucky versus West Virginia.
Well, and the part of the point earlier that was made on the slides was the fact that you didn't even necessarily have a state standard. So you might be doing this from county to county. You replicate the form and then make modifications from county to county, or so you could cross state boundaries, you could cross county boundaries, whatever it may be. There's a lot of modification that needs to be done, even as you're trying to keep it as repeatable as possible. It's what it sounds like to me based on previous conversation.
Yeah, and you got to have a good relationship with GIS to give them the lead time so they're not waiting until the last minute. Now, there's always usually a plan, but as the plan's usually what you fall back on, and in reality, you're making changes on the fly. Like Paul said, you may have everything set up, then you get out to the field and realize you need other things. Now you're calling back your GIS team saying, hey, I need stuff done now. And now you're really scrambling to adapt to get map layers or to get other information added. So it's always, communication's always key.
That's a very common requirement to be able to make changes while people are out there. One of the interesting places we've seen that is you work with people who've been around the block. They've been doing this for 30 years or something like that. and they're not used to doing things with mobile technology, so they have more knowledge in their heads than they were able to provide to the person who was creating the app. And then they get out in the field and they say, oh yeah, we should ask this question too. So they got to be able to get back to be able to basically make a phone call, get that modification done, sync their phones, and get that app reloaded without having to go through some additional heavy duty process. It needs to be that flexible in order to really support those people. And that gets us back a little bit to the question about how much time we have to do the job. So the responses we got, the question to remember is, from a GIS perspective, how much lead time do you typically get on a project that has a fieldwork component? And about a third of people said they have plenty of time to do the job. And that number is actually higher than I would have expected, to be honest. I don't know how you all feel about it, but that's actually a little higher than I would have expected. 43%, a little under half, said barely enough, right? So they can get the job done, but man, it's a squeaker. Not enough time to do it right is about a fifth of people, 19%. And they usually need it right now, or to Paul's point, might have needed it a couple days ago or whatever. You're getting the data as it is now. That's about 6.3%. So there's about a third of people who have plenty of time to do the job, and the rest of us are either barely enough time or not enough time to do it right, and are scrambling as a result. Pretty interesting. Clearly one of the major problems. James, one of the things that George is talking. Sorry, go ahead, Paul.
I was just going to kind of follow up on a little bit of what James was saying, that and yourself about, there's folks that have been doing this kind of work for a long time, and getting them to sort of used to the technology and trusting the technology and making that shift, right? Like that in and of itself is kind of one piece. And so that may be as simple, again, as, instead of doing narrative answers on paper, they do narrative answers. And by that, I mean free form text or right, a voice recording. And letting them do it that way, just in an electronic form versus on a paper form. And so I think what we're finding is, try not to ask people to change the way they do business overnight. Right. Like, if you can find an option where like let's just get them to use a data collection app, right? They can still answer information freely and quickly. Get them to kind of, as Jane was saying, develop that trust. And even that right there simplifies the process and makes it more efficient for the next downstream person, right? In the case of in this webinar, it's the GIS professionals that are going to take and work with that data. And after some of that level of trust has started to develop, then you can start introducing tighter questions in the data collection form, to start kind of, again, pushing that ability to capture more detailed answers closer to that front end of the process. But if you can just get folks to start using the tool, then that's right. I mean, that's a huge win right there.
Big step in the right direction. James, any commentary there? Or?
No, I mean, he's absolutely right. You get people that aren't used to using it, just to use it a little bit, and you'll have folks that come around and say, wow, this has helped me out tremendously. And then you can, like you said, modify it. A lot of folks, they may not know what the technology can do for them. So they see a little bit and you're like, wow. And then they start thinking, well, how can I apply this to other things? Or the GIS professional can say, hey, this is how you're collecting data. Maybe we can do this and that to make your job easier. You can be on site less, hit more sites. So it's just adapting to a project to get from, nothing to a standardized form that they're using, and then sharing it up to others, and then kind of building out the program like that.
Sure. One of the things that we've been talking about, kind of as part of other things, is the difference between the GIS professional on the one hand and field people on the other. I think it might be worth talking about the differences between these two groups. We have GIS professionals on the phone right now, or on the webcast right now. They might benefit from some experience or understanding of what field people expect, how what they expect is different from what GIS people expect. what those professionals expect, what they're willing to give up, what trade-offs they're willing to make, why they get along well when they do, where they have trouble, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe we should talk a little bit about the difference between GIS professionals and field professionals for a few minutes. Who wants to take that as a initial question?
I don't know if I want to touch that one, Jake.
I don't know. I know the field professionals want to get out there. They want to get their information. Now on the back end, it's very variable. You know, if you're dealing with the state or the federal agencies, everything's pretty standard of what they're asking for and what they want. So the communication should be pretty tight between, you know, if GIS is saying, hey, we could use this app to do this work. You know, I'll see another project, groundwater user surveys, state of Kentucky has a very specified form you want to use. And at the end of the day, your client has to report a certain way, certain tables. So everything's laid out, so it makes it easy. You know, so you're working with GIS, you're saying, hey, we have a project, we've made this form before, we're going out to a new area. So the repeatability is still there, but because you're in another area, you're gonna, you know, they have to have time to bring in parcel data, bring in mapping data. But at the end of the day, the end result is you're going to export out a table of information for the client to drop into a permit for the state. So pretty standardized. You know, the field guys don't want to spend a whole lot of time doing GIS work. You know, most of their time is going to be spent in the field. But if you can sell that, you know, your work's going to be more efficient, you're going to have less time duplicating information. I think that's where the relationship is going to come from. I think they're, you know, I know from the biological side, they're aware of how important GIS is. I don't, you know, I can't speak to other industries, but I know from the biological, ecological, environmental side, you're taught to have a strong GIS component to your work because you're going to need it.
Okay. It might be interesting to send out a second polling question. Polling question number 2 would be, how much time do you as a GIS professional spend in data creation or app creation versus reporting and analysis on the data that the apps provide? So how much time do you spend basically on creating the environment or setting things up for people who are going to be out in the field versus using the data that they bring back to you? And we have 5 possible answers on that. Following the 80-20 rule, we spend 80% of our time on creating the environment, and then 20% or less on reporting and analysis. Or is it closer to 50% creation and 50% analysis? So it's a little bit more 50-50. Do we flip the 80-20 rule the other way? So you spend 20% or less of your time on creating apps and 80% or more of your time on doing the analysis. And then the other 2 possible answers are that, like Paul was saying before, you get data after the fact, and maybe it's not even appropriate for what you would want to do with it, so you don't get the benefit analysis as often as you'd like. Or maybe as a GIS professional, you're not doing app creation for field teams at all. So if we have that open, it's going to take a couple of moments to respond. In about 30 seconds or so, we'll get a response back. But I think it'll be interesting to see how much people are spending their time on these various aspects of working with field teams and see where that goes.
So while that's going on, Jake, I will follow up
Sure.
Just a little bit on the previous kind of question of, sort of the difference between these folks and kind of leading into this poll question. And I see there's some great questions coming into the chat window there. But I think again, when I was doing sort of GIS data manipulation and creation and analysis, the part about my job that I enjoyed the least was the data cleanup side of things. And so taking this data that for whatever reason is not in a good form, or maybe it's it's just messy, it's not, again, it hasn't been quantified, it hasn't been sorted out so that you could do analysis down the line. And so that, again, in this context of GIS professionals working with field professionals, that that's kind of the point maybe that I had seen that sort of point of contention where some of that came from the fact that field staff would prefer to kind of get the information captured as quickly as they can. And I think, that's one area where there can be some, again, like developing that trust and coming to that comment, to reminding ourselves that we all have the interests of the client at heart, and we want to soup to nuts from beginning to end see this whole process work as efficiently as we can. So if on both sides folks can kind of empathize with one another on where sort of some of that burden is going to fall to get the data clean, and coming to that agreement. It's going to be different with different organizations and how they're structured, but again, that's kind of one place to start, to step back and realize it's not just one person doing their job and another person doing their job. We're serving the interests of the client or the customer.
Absolutely. Great. We do have some results back from the last poll. The question again, how much time do you as a GIS professional spend in creating apps for data capture versus reporting and analysis on the data the apps provide? For 80% creation, 20% analysis, it's about 23%. 50-50 is about 31%. 80% analysis, 20% creation is about 21%. So it's slanted. It's actually pretty close to 50-50. And if you look at the amount of people who do more analysis versus more app creation, it's about an equal spread on those two things. A little over a quarter of you said, about 27%, or pardon me, 29% said that you don't create field apps at all. So you are probably dependent on other people providing those apps to the field, or dependent on the field creating the kind of data capture processes that are necessary for you to deliver, to get the data delivered to you as need be. So very interesting. A lot of time spent on app creation, fair amount of time spent on analysis. Really interesting result there, I think. One of the things, and James, I didn't talk to you about this, but I did talk to Paul about it earlier on, about that kind of complicates matters, is the changing nature of GIS. And this audience might benefit from your perspective on that a little bit. Could you comment on how that affects or has affected the way that we have to support different kinds of field activities?
Like I said, I mentioned earlier, GIS is a component that you're at least on the environmental side, you're kind of taught that it is important and it changes, but at the end of the day, you're collecting a set of data. How you collect it. If you're referring to, you talk about GIS changing on how data is collected or how it's or the output side.
Just the nature of GIS itself, and I apologize. I probably phrased that badly. I was actually gonna ask Paul to respond, since we had talked about it. I didn't mean to put you on the spot, James.
Oh, you're
Paul,
all right.
Is it okay if I put you on the spot there? Is that something
Sure.
you're willing to talk about?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think what we were talking about is just for anyone who's been in this line of work, GIS analysis, data development, cartography. For anyone who's been here for, I don't know, even just 5 years, the way that the whole GIS profession, or sort of what we call GIS, how that's changed from 2021 as it was even, again, just 5-6 years ago, having things delivered more consistently from the web, looking at cloud first types of data analyses, pushing the ability to do cartography into the browser and really into the realm of web designers. And then even the analytics piece really being more integrated into like business intelligence solutions like Tableau, Power BI, Sisense. There are those three kind of classic components of GIS: data, analysis, and visualization, that really have kind of flung apart a bit. And again, it depends on where you work and how things are organized in your company. But I know for a lot of private sector folks, those things have started to tease apart, and it's a real opportunity for someone in the GIS profession to kind of figure out what of those they like best. Like, do they like working with and managing data? Are they really more of a data visualization component? And having that ability or that background in cartography, you've got an opportunity to really lend your skills to the broader data visualization sort of field of things. And then likewise, if you're really more of an analytics kind of person, there's really huge opportunities to bring your skill set specifically with analysis types of spatial data and expose that to a different audience as well. So it's just interesting to me to see how these things have started to, I guess, in a lot of ways, pull apart from the sort of classic history of where all of that was just captured into sort of one position of your quote GIS guy.
Sure. And that's actually interesting too, because we've been spending some of the conversation here talking about the difference between the GIS guy and the field team member. But now the changing nature of what you just described may mean there's actually more people on that team, more people to consider even than that. And one of the additional challenges that people face, correct me if I'm wrong on this, is that they're very often geographically distributed now too, whether that's because of COVID or whether it's because the changing nature of the way that we've been doing business. It used to be that a team member would be close by, grab a notebook, go over to the GIS person, show the notebook, and now the GIS person might be sitting in Florida while the field person might be sitting in Kentucky. So there's a lot more dispersal of team members too that makes it that communication challenge all the stronger. Do you agree with that? Disagree?
Yeah, I'd like to hear James's thought, but just he and I is a good example. James, we're both at the same organization. I'm in Minneapolis. James is in Lexington, and so a lot of the field work he's doing, I don't have a lot of visibility into, like personal visibility. It's not a project like, in my region. But myself or others on my staff, are helping him out with the GIS side of things. So for us, tools like Fulcrum and integration with a variety of GIS platforms kind of helps establish or keep that relationship.
Yeah, I'll speak of more of the Kentucky side, and this also may answer some of the questions in the comment section. But we're not only Paul and I are spatially separated, but even for Kentucky Fish and Wildlife, our team doing the work is all separated, and so the pitch to Fish and Wildlife, and it's a pitch we would probably make to other clients, is like, here's a platform you could use to see real-time data. The alternative to that, and let's say I was going out and doing field work a year ago, people were still using paper forms. So I'm gonna go out there, I'm gonna collect a bunch of field data, I'm gonna bring more equipment than what I would normally need if I was just bringing a mobile app with me. I'm gonna go out there and transcribe and write down everything, and I'm gonna come back to the office on Friday. It's gonna sit on my desk till Monday. Then I'm gonna take that, I'm gonna make clean copies, I'm gonna get them scanned in, I'm gonna build up a spreadsheet, and I'm gonna email it to folks or somehow share it. So now there's a lag time. There's extra resources I'm spending on the back end when I could just go out there, collect the data, sync it. All parties have a sign in or access to it at that point. So if the stream designer say, hey, we need to go out there and collect this data, we need to look at this, you get a team out there, you collect the data. As soon as you get into an area where you can upload it, you hit it. Now the stream designer 2 states away can look at your data. There's no lag time. There's no the field tech taking time on the back end, going through all of his forms, making sure things were filled out, making sure things were legible, they were clean, and then uploaded them. So you optimize workflow. The data shared between everyone in real time, and then these teams that I typically work with that are still in that mindset of pen and paper, they're starting to see the how much proficiencies increase with this, and they're like, and then they start buying into it, and then that's how you kind of share it. You use, like, in this situation, I would be like, bridging that between our company and our clients, or our partners, our other team members that aren't on board with this technology yet, and then just sharing it out from there. And and then you always have if you got to go out to the field and there's you need to modify a form, you can easily call back when you get done of the day, talk to your GIS team. Hey, we need to make modifications on this form. Usually if it's just a few modifications, it won't take long, and then you're up and running the next day, and you can just keep going.
Super. One of the repeating themes that you keep on coming back to, James, is communication, and how important that is, and you as well, Paul, how important that communication is. Watching the clock, we're about 15 minutes before the end of the webinar, so I'd like to transition now to taking questions from the audience. Actually, before I do, James, I think as a product person, it's important for me to say, you talked about that kind of real-time updates. It's important to know for Fulcrum specifically that if you don't have a signal, that we are able to capture the data and then forward it as soon as you do get a cell or Wi-Fi signal. So even in places where you don't have communication bandwidth, you still have the ability to capture the information and forward it on.
Yep. That's a great one, Jake, that you mentioned. I've had colleagues of mine that they were always nervous about using this technology because they go, well, I'm out in the field. We're always working when there's no signal. We're out in Eastern Kentucky, we're out in these hollers. And that's one of the selling points is if you can do it offline, they'll get a little bit more comfortable wanting to use the data because they're not afraid it's going to get lost.
Sure. There's no way to drive people back to pen and paper faster than making it so they can only do it where there's good Wi-Fi signal, because it's too often that they don't have it and they'll just fall back. So transitioning then to some of the questions we got in the audience chat, I do appreciate how much y'all are asking questions, and I encourage you to ask more of them. Stefan says, I have no experience with Fulcrum. What are the advantages of using Fulcrum connected to your GIS database instead of using the possibilities of the GIS platform? I would say that there's several different aspects to this. One of them is that Fulcrum is designed so that people who are not GIS specialists are still capturing data that is GIS enabled, location aware. So for example, you can have a field team go out and create their own version of a form. Great story, for example, Fresno, California, the county of Fresno, California, after a wildfire, took a FEMA application form and digitized that in about 10 minutes. And the next morning they had volunteers out there collecting data, and just being able to do that in a more flexible way while still being able to plug that data back into the GIS application is one of the key use cases for Fulcrum. So the tight integration with GIS, but being focused on no-code development of forms and apps for the field is really where Fulcrum shines.
I'll just comment in real quick too, that because there's a few questions kind of that connect, that are a similar theme, that we have clients, or we have staff at Respec that also use tools like Arcgis Collector, Survey123, and those are a great option for folks that are kind of working with those, and they tend to be kind of users that are kind of fully within the GIS world. So they've got an ArcGIS license, they're connected to Arcgis Online, so that's great solutions for them. But we have probably more staff that want to be able to collect spatially located data and information, but they want to be able to do it a little more freely, a little less having to sort of kind of fully buy themselves into that sort of ecosystem where it's kind of all coming from that environment.
Great. Thank you very much for that, Sue. And we want to make sure that we properly support the care and feeding of the GIS tool as well. So for example, you can actually get one-click integration with ArcGIS Online from Fulcrum. You can literally take data that's been collected and with a single click push it out to ArcGIS Online, log in, modify it, however you want to deal with that. We've got some demonstrations of that on our website at fulcrumapp.com. So if you're interested in that, feel free. We're using the latest standards, things like feature services. But we also support other things such as GeoJSON and KML and other location formats. So we'd be very happy to talk about a discussion there. It might be best for the purposes of this conversation here to just invite you to contact us and see what your requirements are and see if Fulcrum will fit the bill for you there. And thank you for that, Paul, because there are a number of different people asking questions about things like Survey 123, et cetera, et cetera. So thank you for addressing those. Diego asks, and this is not product-oriented, but more culture-oriented, how do you manage culture change and work with the resistance from PMs and partners and sellers? Who would like to take that?
Well, if you can put a value to it, that always helps. If you can put a dollar amount to savings, that perks ears. So if you can communicate, efficiency, increases in workflow, I think that all helps get people on board with what you're doing. Basically, to understated here is if you could sell them on how to make their lives easier doing this stuff, I think more people will get on board with it.
Money talks as always.
And I think to that culture change piece, that's, as I was saying, ReSpec has grown. I don't remember what the metrics are, James, but we've doubled in size in 5 years, I think.
Every 5 years we've doubled.
We've doubled in size every 5 years, and again, largely by bringing on other smaller companies. And so right there, every time we do that, we're faced with a culture integration. And how do we manage that? And I think I don't know if it's so much resistance as it really is maybe skeptical. And so, right, the proof is in the pudding, right, as they say. So show them a way in which it works. I know James and I are working on James as head of health and safety, right? So we're looking at ways to change the sort of or enable a tighter culture when it comes to tracking health and safety information throughout the company.
It's interesting. People talk about a culture of safety, and we were talking to a VP of safety at a construction company. It's not particularly a GIS issue, but it is a culture issue. And one of the things that he told us about was talking to some of his longest time employees. And the amazing thing about these long time employees is they're the best at what they do. They have the most experience, but they also tend to be the most technology reluctant. So he basically was talking to the guy and at one point said, so tell me what it is that's stopping you from using this. What's so hard? You got to check some boxes on a screen. You got to do a drop down box. Why is that so hard? Do you think you can just try that for a week and tell me how it goes? And chided the guy a little bit. The guy said, no, you know what? I can use it. And he did use it. And once that person kind of converted, once that person said, yes, I can do it, it's something I can handle, the dominoes started to fall a lot more. It was a matter of getting his advocacy as a longtime employee that everybody knew wasn't up on the latest technical stuff, but he was able to use it. And by seeing him start to use it, people were able to start becoming more in line with the expectations that he had for safety, and that helps them change their safety culture.
That's a good point. That's what I'm struggling with now. That's what I'm struggling with now a little bit on the safety side. It is
a challenge.
Yep.
Culture for safety is huge. This one is from Vital from Rwanda. How do you manage related tables in a Fulcrum map? I don't have time enough to go into all the different ways that we can talk about that stuff, but I think it's important to know that inside Fulcrum, we expect you to be able to do things like preload data. I was just talking about County of Fresno in California, when they did their wildfire inspections, post-wildfire inspections to report to FEMA, they loaded up, I think it was 8,000 different sites that were related to road intersections and road positions. They preloaded that data. They preloaded the locations for it so that people knew exactly where they were going. Preloading that data is really important. And also, if you have information that's going to be used in multiple places, then you need to be able to have that available. And you can load that stuff into Fulcrum as well and make sure that it's available even offline for people who are going to be, out surveying different kinds of audiences. So there's a lot. The data capabilities are as important as the data collection capabilities, if you will. Having the data available and making sure that it's reliable and online and for you even when you are offline is really critical. I don't know if James or Paul, you want to address anything there, or I can move on to the next one.
Well, actually, if it's the same project, I kind of worked on wildfire response out in California.
Did you?
I was part of that a little bit, and it was site assessments for household hazardous waste. And to be honest, I don't know if it was if the EPA was using the Fulcrum app for this, but they were using a data collection tool, and it was good to have. Everybody got an iPad. They went out to the field, and when you had teams of, I want to say, up to 2,000 people going out and surveying thousands of structures, you need to have everything together, aligned, logistically sound. When you're putting out that many teams in certain areas, you don't want to have any overlap. You don't want to have teams, rolling on top of each other. You need to keep people separate and hitting houses without any, repeated forms coming in or people hitting the same homes or structures, stuff like that. So, I could say whatever they used, it was efficient. I know they had to have a small team of GIS professionals that were on site, and I know talking to a couple of them, it was long hours. GIS was a huge component in that project, and they were shoved into a trailer, and as far as I know, they work 24 hours a day.
Sure. Fantastic. Great experience. There are a number of kind of detailed Fulcrum questions here that I'm going to not be able to respond to right now. I've only got a couple of minutes left. I don't have any experience on this one, so James and Paul, I'm throwing you under the bus and seeing if you've got experience on it. How do you use the mobile app in forests where the GPS accuracy is not very good? Any thoughts or comments on that?
I've actually hadn't had any issues using it in the hollers of Eastern Kentucky yet. So if I could speak to a dead zone I had, but I mean, we're out in very remote Eastern Kentucky. If nobody's ever been there, it's remote, deep valleys. I haven't ran into a GPS problem using it yet.
Super.
Yeah, I mean, I'll comment that if you've got, I guess if you're in an area with poor cell coverage, that doesn't necessarily impact it. It doesn't impact the native accuracy of the GPS in your mobile device. If you want to pair your phone with a higher accuracy, more powerful external GPS, I know Fulcrum's got some information on their website. I think it was a blog posting, Jake, on experience pairing Fulcrum on a mobile device with via Bluetooth to a variety of external GPS devices. Barring that, you can have offline air photos and other base reference maps on the device, and you can always manually kind of manipulate the location based on kind of maybe reference points that you've baked into an offline base map. Maybe they're stream meanders or road crossings or things that you can use as some of those reference points.
Yeah, that's what we've done. Oh, go ahead.
No.
Let's say it's kind of the relationship we have with, when I call Paul, it's often the GPS on my phone is pretty accurate to where I'm at. But a lot of times if let's say I'm looking from a structure and I kind of need a base map to orientate myself off of or know where to go, the resolution may not be there. So you can get an offline map put as a layer, but my GPS on my phone is pretty accurate to where I am.
And to James's point, we can bring map, MB tiles and other maps down to Fulcrum and make it possible for you to see exactly where you're standing, so you can pinpoint where the record was collected on that map, and therefore you'll make sure that you've got a precise location for where you are. Diego asks, in your experience, what's the percentage of increased efficiency using Fulcrum apps? And for that, I mean, I could give a self-serving answer. I've got a couple, but of data points there. But James and Paul, do you have any thoughts on increased efficiency using the app?
I don't know that we've ever quantified it. I can just say, if we had James, if we had someone like Mike, who was with you on some of those Eastern Kentucky Phase 1 projects, right? It's a bit more qualified answer, but from how he describes what the efficiency that Fulcrum offers him now to ultimately get these reports out to the client versus how he would have done the same project a year ago, it's sort of like he just kind of shakes his head saying, I can't even imagine trying to do it the way we used to do it.
Yeah, Mike is a good point, because I was going to bring him up earlier about one of the, how you communicate with people that weren't on board with the technology. And Mike, one of our engineers, would do these Phase 1 assessments by just writing handwritten notes in a notebook. But now he has standardized. He can think through what he should be looking for. The form kind of helps guide you during the assessment, and then you're hitting drop down, hitting buttons. You can type in some free form notes if you need to, and then it's all collected into a database that they can just, when he gets back and he needs to build out a report, he just exports it. On my end, like Paul said, I can't quantify it, but if I'm recording information once versus how I did it years ago, would I record information in the field, re-record it to clean it up in the office, and then re-record it again on a spreadsheet? Well, I've done the same thing 3 times. Now, using the app, I've done it 1 time. So can't quantify the efficiency, but I'm doing what, 1/3 of the work I used to. So that's helpful. The groundwater user surveys are the same way. It's a pretty extensive form the state has you fill out, and a lot of it you may not need, but when you're knocking on 2,000 doors, you take a form, you take the app, you split up into, the 2 individuals, and you're just quickly going down a form, because a lot of people are reluctant to answer the door anyways, but when they do, you don't want to take up too much of your time. So I think the form, it keeps the conversation efficient, and you can go down there, answer your questions, hit submit, and it's saved up in the cloud, and you can carry on about your day. And now you're not carrying thousands of forms.
Yeah. Jake, I just wanted to chime in real quick. I know we're about out of time, but Mike M did ask a question that I don't think we'll have time to answer here. But Mike M, if you're still out there, if you want to find me on LinkedIn, just look up my name. I'm the only Paul Wickman, I think, out there. But Mike had a question about using Fulcrum app data to train TensorFlow models. And that's something I've kind of been tossing around back and forth with a couple other guys on the Fulcrum team. So I'd love to chat more, Mike, with you about that.
There's a ton of potential application here to AI with all the data that gets collected and the way that we collect data. And frankly, we've got a bunch of additional questions that we are not going to have time to get to. We're already 2 minutes over time, but it's been a fantastic discussion. We will take the questions from the audience. We have your email addresses and stuff like that, so we will respond to those. But in the meantime, I'd just like to thank James and Paul very much for coming on, delivering some of the experience that you've gained with ReSpec over the years, as well as with using Fulcrum as part of that. I'd like to thank you all for being out there. You've got other things you could have done with your day, and you spent an hour with us, and we greatly appreciate that. We'd love to hear more from you, and please reach out to us at fulcrumapp.com for more information. Thank you very much, and have a great day.